Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video view series where we take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the monster book Dragons Remastered, designed by Magnus, Andersen, Vogel, and Lucas Andersen for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Dragons are a pretty big part of Dungeons & Dragons. It's right there in the name, although I am well aware of the meme and the joke of dungeons and only occasionally sometimes dragons, so maybe a bit more underrepresented than people would think. But they are not underrepresented in the 5th edition monster manual. In fact, there are, let's see, I wrote this down, over 30 pages and 40 stat blocks devoted to the chromatic and metallic dragons in the monster manual. So they actually get the most amount of love of any kind of creature type out there. And recently, we just had Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, which included a whole bunch of other new dragons in case you wanted some of the, the gem mineral dragons and more information about dragons and lore and things. So why do you need yet another dragon book? Well, Dragons Remastered takes all of the stat blocks from the original 5e monster manual, rebalances some of them, and mainly gives us some new content in the form of new flavorful legendary actions, new breath weapons, new dragon-specific spells, and I think it works very, very well because if you've been looking through the dragon stat blocks, they're fine, but obviously they're very copy and pasted from each other, right? They can all do the same, wings and claws attacks, because you get the baseline model and then it's like, okay, whatever color it is, that's what kind of breath weapon it's going to do. And that's really kind of the only difference between all these different dragons, despite having wildly different, personality types and, layers and regions and all these things. You might see that reflected in their layer actions and their regional effects, but in terms of their legendary actions, it's all the same, and generally their stat blocks are all the same. So what this tries to do is better differentiate all those different dragons between each other, and I think it does a very cool job, especially the legendary actions, because flipping through the monster manual, I'm reminded, oh yeah, one of the legendary actions that dragons can take is to make a perception check as a legendary act. Like, no, we can come up with better things than just looking around for intruders. There's so many cool things that dragons can do, and that is represented here in this book. It also gives us several new dragons, as you can tell from the table of contents: Adamantine Dragon, Orium Dragon, Purple Dragon, Gray Dragon. I believe these were all dragons that existed in previous editions of D&D, but as far as I'm aware, are not in 5e, and I don't think Fizban's added them in there either. Fizban's, I think, had a Deep Dragon, which is kind of close to what some of these other dragons are. But specifically, these do add some very cool dragons, and they all have their own, unique themes and personalities and stuff. It's a 100-page book filled with great art. A lot of it is stock art, yes, but the layout, I think there is something to be said about a gorgeous layout that's just very nice and lovely to read. It has, I believe, some original art as well, or commissioned art for the new dragons. I really like the look of it, even though it's obviously like half stat blocks. And one cool thing it does for every single entry are these description rolls for all the different kinds of dragon types, which is literally, your players can make either a history check or religion check, and then based on how well they roll, that's how much information that the DM is supposed to give them. I use this all the time in my games, by the way. I usually like to have my players roll. In fact, we have a house roll where you can identify a creature by rolling a check, and then depending on how well you roll, that's how much information you get. And I try to just ad-lib it while I'm doing that to try and make it less like, okay, well, here are its, resistances and here's its main attack or something. You try and say like, oh, okay, well, you heard about this from this person. You get fun with it. And this actually does do that in like a paragraph format where you're designed to like read exactly what the designer has written down to players that make that kind of skill check. And it does those for all the dragons, which is cool. So not only does it have some very nice information, which is not copy and pasted from the monster manual, but is actually really good at explaining, hey, here are the main like traits of different kinds of dragons. So silver dragons are very religious. Red dragons are egotistical bullies. Copper dragons are competitive jocks. Mercury dragons are obsessed with beauty. it distills all the dragons into those pretty simple little, traits and archetypes, and then from there explains, okay, and because they like this, they like religion, so they hoard all these religious artifacts. Or because they are competitive jocks, they might be interested in all these games that they play with people, and they're always just trying to compete. That stuff's really helpful for a DM. It's easy for me to understand. It doesn't get bogged down in a bunch of proper names and places and histories, and it just says, hey, here are the traits you can work with to build your own dragon. So I think the description level is very, very good. We're actually going to go over some stat blocks here. I'm going to flip through some pages just so you can see how good the art. I love the actual use of the double page spread with the background. That looks really, really slick and helps break up the pages, as well as that really neat description roll sidebar that's done in that kind of weathered parchment style. Looks very nice as well. So I was really just overall impressed with the layout and the presentation that this product has. We're going to skip to... let's go to Green Dragon, because I thought Green Dragon especially, let's go one more back, it's a better picture, has a great new stat block. So in terms of rebalancing, one of the things that it does is actually make Wyrmlings easier, so they're less like crazy swingy boss fights, because again, Wyrmlings are CR2 for the most part, which I want to say is like ogre-ish. You're starting to get a little tougher, but and maybe, one is designed for like a boss fight for low-level players, but because of their breath weapons doing so much damage, it could, potentially just annihilate an entire party. So I think the designer says, okay, we want you to be able to use Wyrmlings a little more without, maybe them being too deadly. We're going to lower the AC, we're going to lower the hit points, and we're going to lower the actual breath weapon. So the whole thing is rebalanced to be a little easier. Once you start getting up the dragons, I think it's still generally, I haven't identified every single one of them, but generally it keeps the lowered AC, lower hit points, but it gives us more offensive capabilities. And I am very much in favor of rebalancing creatures to jack up the offensive potential and lower their defenses, because I think that just makes for a better fight. That is something I've learned from years of running D&D now, is that the most fun battles are not the ones that stick around forever because both sides are just hitting each other or soaking up hit points or missing each other or whatever else. It's when you've got these big, explosive, crazy multi-hit attacks or huge breath weapons, something that does a ton of damage, but then the enemies don't necessarily, stick around and last forever. They go down, kind of glass cannon-y almost. So I am a big fan of actually rebalancing things in that way. And some of them do it better than others in terms of giving them the new abilities. All of them get secondary breath weapons, which is huge because you could just use, if your one is recharging, I think you can just use the other breath weapon, and they all have different effects that kind of have to do with, well, they do have to do with whatever their, theme or ability is. So Green Dragon's obviously all about the poison damage and poisoning people, and so they still have their poison breath, the regular, but their enthralling breath actually works like a kind of charm effect that essentially gives them almost the grappled condition, except not really, just reduced to 0 until the end of your turn. So it's a one-use, like kind of frozen in place ability, and it does psionic damage instead of psychic damage. So it's kind of a hallucinogenic gas poison that it sprays at people, which is very interesting. And its trait is Master of Poisons, where it can coat its own claws with these different poison effects. And then when it attacks, they all have these different, debuffs or additional effects or things. And it keeps cranking up as you get more stronger dragons. So the young dragon might only have two of these poisons to use. The adult has 3 and the ancient has 4. And then as legendary actions, they can actually either do additional poison claw attacks or recharge their poisons as part of their legendary actions. They did keep the detect in there, which is a bummer. I hate that one. But a lot of them have a really great legendary. I think the Master of Poison is just an awesome one. That's a really great example of giving a specific dragon really cool new abilities, and the legendary actions reflect its new abilities pretty well. For the silver dragons, their legendary actions, they're all about more almost clerical spells or protection. So their legendary actions involve, creating like a little protection zone that increases the AC of itself and all of its creatures, or giving itself a, kind of a sanctuary type spell. It also has the ability to, spray out additional, in addition to its freezing breath, it's got the soothing breath, where everybody takes... can gain, either takes cold damage or it can do it on its own like allied minions, and then they gain temporary hit points and increase their AC. So it's actually a buffing spell. Bronze dragons, I think, is that the next? Yeah, the next one. you know, they are the tacticians or the warriors or the soldiers. So their legendary actions involve regroup, sally forth, where they can charge forward and they can push people, or defensive maneuver, where they can crouch and essentially like ready attacks as part of a legendary action. Very, very thematic, and I think it works really, really well to have more exciting legendary actions, especially if your players have kind of can't get away from the metagaming knowledge of a lot of dragons. Like, okay, well, this red dragon obviously is going to shoot fire. And yeah, that's true, but you might have a red dragon that shoots like a meteor burst out of its mouth that explodes, and then its legendary actions involve, you know, manipulating fire in different ways. And on top of that, you can give it these dragon-specific spells, which I believe are at the very... It's always tricky to review the bigger products because I got to hop around a little more. Okay, so we've got these dragon-specific spells. And initially, I was reading through this guide thinking, you know, I'm a little disappointed that we're not getting more spells built into the stat block, because it's something that I don't like that the Monster Manual does, which is just say, hey, any dragon cast spells, good luck, just work with that. Well, okay, give me some, you know, example ideas or something, help me out here. And this one, at least it does say, hey, anybody can cast any spells, but then it says, okay, what about we create some dragon-specific spells and we organize them by type, so that obviously if you have a red dragon, you can look at the fire magic grouping. If you have, you know, maybe a gold or silver dragon, or somebody who, or a blue dragon who's very attuned to knowledge and wizardry, then you can look at the high magic group of spells, which is all about like shutting down, you know, spell slots, or making it harder to concentrate, or, you know, kind of giving yourself like a minor shield spell. You could give a black dragon the necromancy group of spells, which involves summoning ghosts, which becomes kind of an environmental hazard, or just having the like kind of the animate dead spell that you can use as a bonus action and just summon, you know, hordes of skeletons and zombies or something. Some really cool ideas. I like the way that they are grouped by theme, because that's exactly what I want when I'm looking at spells for a dragon to be able to use. Is I want to fit that dragon's main theme and, you know, evoke that. And obviously if it's elemental, I think that's the easiest one to use, but it does give us some options with fire magic and ice magic. I do like the curse magic, necromancy, and especially if they are specifically, you know, maybe you're running Horde of the Dragon Queen, you're thinking, okay, there's a whole line of spells based on Tiamat. By the way, we do get extra huge CR30 stat blocks of the avatars of Tiamat and Bahamut, which are insane and hilarious and huge, if that's your thing. We also have the new dragons. We can take a look at some of those. In case you wanted some new dragons. 20, I wrote that one down wrong. 27, where's Adamantine? There it is, 20, oh, it is 27. Adamantine Dragon, these are the crafting dragons that live underground. They can weaken people with their breath, and they can gain, which I think erases your resistance or immunities. And then their own malleable hide lets them gain resistance or immunities. Orium dragons are jungle dragons that when they breathe their unique vapor breath, they can actually summon these vapor creatures as part of their breath weapon attack, which is pretty neat. And then their legendary actions allow them to work with that. It's designed to work in conjunction with that, so they can consume them to gain a buff attack to gain more damage with their own weapons. They can just command them to, you know, attack other people, or they can detonate them to explode and deal acid damage all around them, which is pretty awesome. So that is a really unique stat block. Mercury dragons can like move through you because they're just made of this, I picture like the T-1000 kind of a thing, just this liquid metal. Really, really neat ideas. And that's just the metallic dragons. The chromatic ones, I believe, are brown, gray, and purple. Brown dragons are the desert city rulers. They're kind of not even necessarily despots, but they just love hoarding people and like ruling over different cities. And they've got all these, you know, sand themed powers, which is pretty cool. Purple dragons are your underdark, you know, psychic dragons that have the psionic breath weapons. They have these telekinetic abilities that literally telekinetic crush is just like a Darth Vader force choke, which is pretty awesome for a dragon to sit there and do. And I love the fact that it's built into their stat block, so you don't have to choose between, oh, do I use the multi-attack or do I use, you know, their cool TK powers. You don't have to choose. You can replace any of their attacks with any of their force choke, or the other one is psionic bombardment, which is just picking up rocks and throwing them at enemies. And then of course they can psychically like push and pull, and just, you know, if they're flying, they can pull somebody. Like, what a freaking cool idea for a dragon, is to give it psychic, like telekinetic powers, is really, really fun. And then the gray dragons are your petrifying dragons. And a couple different dragons, and this one I'll highlight, use these new concepts. Like, I think ice dragons can make these ice walls. There was one that had some kind of metallic debuff that it could give to people. And it starts to get a little fiddly, but thankfully it doesn't do too far into any of these things. But I thought that the petrifying breath does a good job of realizing that, you know, maybe like a 1-2 punch on full petrification is a little much. So what about if it just slowed you down, literally like slowed your speed by this much every round that you failed until finally you did petrify? I think that's actually a little more exciting and interesting. And you could kind of play with that as a DM too, but I think that's a worthy case of trying to rebalance petrification a little bit so they don't immediately get just, you know, screwed completely by fighting a dragon that can literally just exhale this huge cone attack and inflict this horrifying petrifying effect on everybody. I love that one of the legendary actions is to eat a statue, which means if somebody has been petrified, it can go over there and chomp and consume that statue to regain hit points. That is freaking fantastic and glorious. So I think there's a lot of really great content in here. I think it does a good job of generally rebalancing dragons on the whole to make them a little defensively weaker. In fact, if you notice, the adults even only have 2 legendary resistances, and it's only the ancient dragons which have all 3 because they gain those other specific abilities that either they might get straight like damage mitigation or you know, malleable resistance or some other like trait that's always on. And then we get that additional breath weapon in a lot of cases, and then legendary actions that are I think a lot more interesting and powerful. So that's the way it kind of rebalances it, which I think is straight up a great idea and probably a better way to run dragons in general. Here's an example of the CR30 Avatar of Tiamat, which is just hilariously awesome. This particular one, if it drops below hit points, you know, it goes into blinky red boss mode, to use an old video game terminology. You have to roll on a D10 tail to whatever crazy thing that starts happening. Some of them could debuff the avatar, and others it's like, you know, it explodes with energy or something. Very cool ideas to create, and like 5 legendary actions. I mean, this is, you know, top tier, like level 20 boss fight here, which is awesome. Very cool ideas. And I think that's about it. We get the spells, and then the final some draconic ancestry ideas for you know, basically including all the new dragon content here in terms of all those new breath weapons into your dragonborn characters if you wanted to make them certain offshoots of those dragons. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for there's another cool one. For Dragons Remastered. Pros: new traits, breath weapons, and legendary actions for every dragon in the 5e monster manual. Almost. We'll get that to a con in just a second, but that is still a crap ton of content. 100 pages of dragon stat blocks. Pro brings 6 new dragons to 5e plus 2 godlike avatars. So in addition to all of the 10 dragon types from the monster manual, we get 3 new chromatics, 3 new metallics, and they all have 4 stat blocks each, and then the 2 avatars, those big CR30, you know, top of the line boss fights. So extra content on top of what's already in the monster manual. And I thought all of the new ones were very cool and helped fill in the gaps of different either environmental regions or like you know, mechanical effects and things that you would want to face. I thought they were all very cool, exotic, neat ideas. None of them felt like they were, you know, too close to another existing dragon. Pro, informative description rolls for every type of dragons. Those were these sidebars right here, that kind of parchment stuff. I just thought it was really cool information. I mean, I think in general they did a really good job of giving me the most important, you know, nuts and bolts of describing a dragon for me, the DM, and then they gave me the ability for me to describe the dragon to the players, which is something I think a lot of these books you know, just kind of assume that DMs are going to do that work, and obviously we do, but I think it's still very useful to have that information, because that's partly what, again, I've said that I've tried to do in my games, is somebody rolls to figure out, okay, do I know about this creature? And then you have to say, okay, yeah, now let's see how much you know, where you knew it from, and all that. Instead, I can just, hey, I'm just going to read you this starting from here, and that just, I don't, obviously I don't have to do that word for word, but that's still very, very helpful, and I was appreciative of it. Pro, over 20 new dragon-specific spells grouped by theme. Exactly what I wanted from dragon spellcasting. Yes, obviously you can always add any spell to a dragon's repertoire, but that's just a handy way of saying, hey, these are specific dragon spells that are thematically appropriate for dragons of these, you know, certain classes or religious views or whatever else. And that helps a lot in terms of building out their stat block. I'll also say that those spells, they were all actually 1st and 2nd level spells. Go there real quick while I interrupt my own pros and cons. Which initially I was like, well, wait, why is that the case? Because mostly we're fighting higher level dragons, aren't we? Well, yes, but you could be fighting smaller wormlings, or maybe you just wanted your dragon to cast smaller spells. But keep in mind, all of these spells have higher level scaling. So literally, if you wanted your ancient dragon to be able to cast, fire vortex and do more than 1d4 damage, you can have them cast it at like 8th level or whatever, and all of a sudden it's doing way more damage when they cast that little fire tornado. So I think that was actually the smart way to do it. And initially I thought I was confused about why these are all low level spells, and I realized, oh, that's because dragons, they run the gamut. That's what makes them so helpful, and why they should be used more in D&D, because you can literally fight them as, little babies, which are still enough for a full team, or, just ancient, almost avatars of gods on the plane, and then they've got all these super powerful spells. So really smart idea, giving them low level spells that can be scaled up. Final Pro, attractive layout with plenty of dragon art. I think it was a really nice looking book that I really enjoyed flipping through, and enjoying all the artwork, the new artwork, the old artwork. Even if it's a lot of stock art, I thought it was put together very well and looks very attractive and nice to be able to read through it. My cons, despite having really cool legendary actions, there's no new layer actions or regional effects, which I thought was missing. If you're going to make a book all about dragons, and especially how you're, redesigning the dragons from the monster manual, I guess you're telling me, well, those regional effects and layer actions are perfect. And a lot of them were pretty good, but that doesn't mean I don't want to see your take on it. I want to see what kind of differences you can make. So I thought that was a little bit lacking in my point of view, that we didn't get any of that. And then my other con, remember I said most dragons, no love for dragon turtles, which are technically dragons, so we don't get anything for that, or Draco Liches, which are not dragons, but obviously the stat block of dragons is being copy pasted, and then some undead abilities put in there. And I'd love to see, give me some of those different Draco Lich, and I think Fizzbands does do this also, which is give me the different dragon turtle stat blocks and Draco Lich's stat blocks. But then I would like for the designers to apply their rebalancing efforts to those stat blocks. So I did think, as awesome as we got all of these dragons, it felt a little bit like we skipped over those two, very unique kind of dragon. Give me that's the sea dragon, which is the dragon turtle, and then the undead dragon, the Draco Lich, and then we're done. Maybe some kind of devil dragon, but I guess that's already kind of Tiamat. Final verdict. Even if you're all dragoned out from Fizzband's treasury, Dragons Remastered is worth your attention with updated 5e dragons and new breath weapons, legendary actions, and dragon-specific spells. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.